Hello, YouTubers. This is Gold Standard C0924 coming at you with a Wrestling Reimagining series for you guys today. So, I'm going to be continuing this installment of my WCW 1998 Fantasy Booking series, and I'm going to do a fourth edition as I book the April pay per view known as Spring Stampede. So, to kind of recap from my previous third entry, at Uncensored, we had the main event Sting, Kevin Nash for the World Heavyweight Championship. Kevin Nash has been the talk of the town. He had been proclaiming himself to be the Giant Killer ever since the previous pay per view before it, where Kevin Nash did the jackknife powerbomb on the Giant and unintentionally breaking the Giant's neck. So it's announced that he'll be out of action for a while. Um, and the repercussions also includes, J.J. Dillon informing Kevin Nash that if he would the next time around that he would do the jackknife powerbomb, he would be sued with an X amount of money. So he is barred from doing the jackknife powerbomb. And if Kevin Nash wants that number one contendership spot, he would have to comply to WCW's demands and not just JJ Dillon's, but like I mentioned with WCW and the board of directors, anyone that works as far as the booking committee is concerned. So Kevin Nash reluctantly complies to those rules, and he would do anything uh, to gain back the world title, gain that Covenant prize back into the NWO's hands. So so Sting, Kevin Nash had their main event match at Uncensored, and despite Nash's efforts, Sting ends up coming out on top. Um, and then you also in that same pay per view event we had Hogan and Savage going at it. Savage had by this point had been kicked out of the NWO. Those Savage and Hogan had their rift ever since the events that happened at Starrcade, where you know, Sting and Bret Hart costing Hogan the match and the world title belt that the NWO had for a good majority since they formed. Um, and there's been a lot of dissension within the ranks of the NWO, and most notably Hogan and Savage. So it kind of gets to a boiling point, and the NWO kicks Savage out of the NWO, and Savage would beat Hogan in that Falls Count Anywhere match with some assistance from Miss Elizabeth, and even Eric Bischoff kind of interferes at some point in the match to kind of assist Hogan. And Savage is now eligible for a world title opportunity to face Sting. So the main event's set, and there aren't really any title changes to speak of. Basically, those two bullet points, that along with the announcement of DDP's condition. He had the cage match against Raven, and unfortunately, because of the damages that he sustained during the match, it's informed that DDP will be out of action for the next couple of months. So that's also kind of to make note of. And I really didn't really have anything else for DDP to do, throughout a couple pay per views here on out. But he'll be back shortly before you know it, and hopefully not to lose too much heat if stays if he stays out of action for too long. Because he is one of their hottest acts around this time, so there's no denying the popularity that DDP had at this time. Just kind of like a worked injury angle, um, just to kind of really put the heat on Raven and just try to make him out to be the sadistic monster and take it from there. So without further ado, we're just going to kind of kick things off with a tag team title defense. So the Public Enemy defends their belts against Ming and Barbarian, who were known as the Faces of Fear. So so Public Enemy have been holding that belt ever since Sold Out. They've been successfully defending that belt on numerous numerous television matches, whether it be a Nitro or a Thunder, perhaps maybe Saturday night if need be. Public Enemy are really trying to show that they are the top tag team to look out for in the tag team division. And the Faces of Fear take notice of it. They've been squashing a lot of tag teams along the way, whether it's makeshift tag teams or legit pair tag teams like a Volano, like the Volanos, or High Voltage. Those sort of tag teams. And they're basically demonstrating that they are a force to be reckoned with. Um, so yeah, so I know the tag team division. I probably might have mentioned this like in a video or two about how the tag team division really needed a boost during this time because a lot of them were breaking up all at once, and Faces of Fear were one of those tag teams that WCW broke up in reality. But I still kept them as a tag team, and they got Jimmy Hart, who's still the manager for those respective tag team with Megan Barbarian. So they go at it. I guess you can maybe make it a tornado rules. So instead of just basically a standard tag team match where you have to tag your partner and stuff, you can maybe have it be like a tornado match where it's like anything goes. It's free for alls and no restrictions whatsoever. Something to kind of get the crowd rolling because this is like your opening bout. So it's important to kind of really um, try to put the best performance you can and try to get the crowd um, very hyped and hoping to look forward to the next set of matches that'll take place afterwards. So I would have the Faces of Fear walk out of the match as your new tag team champions. Um, I think you maybe have a moment where like the Public Enemy try to put Jimmy Hart through a table, and then like Faces of Fear, like one of the members like prevents them from putting Jimmy Hart through a table or something like that. Um, but at the end of the day, Megan Barbarian will come out on top as your new tag team champions. So there you have it. That. We also got the second match between Scott Steiner and the British Bulldog. This is Scott Steiner's first singles match, aside from, since facing his brother Rick, having turned on him and, selling out to the NWO. So Scott Steiner's trying to make a name for himself. He's sporting that bleach blonde haircut that he started to have during this time, and the white singlet, and debuting the mustache, and the early stages of his big Papa Bump gimmick that he was kind of going through. British Bulldog, is kind of there just to kind of really put over Steiner. So I kind of gave away the result there. But yeah, this should be a pretty short match, nothing too long, but just British Bulldog just trying to get into Scott Steiner's head and talk about how it was a mistake of him to turn his back on his brother, the guy that he looked out for and took care of. They both won tag titles around the world in the past. They've had their history and how they thought that they were inseparable. And British Bulldog also providing some of his expertise because he's also used to be part of a tag team. In the 80s with Dynamite Kid. Just, mention the fact that British Bulldog, also used to be part of a tag team at one point, and, the fact that, comparing Bulldog and Steiner as like these two muscle bound athletes, known for their physique. So you could kind of play upon that. And, these guys, go one on one. And Scott Steiner will win the match by using the Steiner recliner. So British Bulldog taps out, or submits for that matter. But whatever the case may be, Steiner will come out on top, and just really try to cement Scott as this uh, as a key player to look out for in the year 1998. So Scott Steiner, he's really really trying to show himself. He's kind of undergoing um, a bit of character development, hopefully, and take it from there. Really try to show the vicious side of the early stages of Big Papa Pump, if you want to put it that. So there you have it. With Scott Steiner going over the Bulldog. Third match we have is Conan versus Crispin. This is going to be for the television championship belt. So you could basically make it a little simple. Conan and Crispin both have submission holds, and announcers try to play up as to who has the better uh, submission. Conan had the Tequila Sunrise. Crispin had the Crippler Crossface. Even though this wouldn't be a submission match officially, but you just kind of have try to put those two wrestlers over as much as you can. Conan's the only member of the NWO to even hold a championship belt. Kristen Wall's been kind of floundering, since the Horsemen broke up, and he tried to go after the U.S. title, but he kind of came up short at the end. But Ben Wall, tries to work his way back up the ladder, and he's still winning matches on TV, and eventually he sets his eyes out on the TV title belt. And Benoit still can't forget the fact that the NWO screwed him over, or the fact that the NWO tried to murder Ric Flair on a number of occasions, and Conan tried to bring up the fact that Conan was also part of that War Games match that they were both in this past back in September of '97, and you also kind of play up that and how he couldn't forgive the NWO for what they did to Flair and the reason why the Horsemen aren't together anymore. Um, so that's basically kind of like your build up to the match, and basically it's just been fuming in the Crispin Wall for a while and blaming their reason for why he's been kind of where he is now. So the match is set. The TV title's up for grabs. Benoit will win the match with the Crippler Crossface. So Benoit walks out as your new television champion. The gauntlet match between Goldberg and the Flock. So basically, this is going to be Goldberg's first real big feud as far as ever since he started wrestling in WCW. So this is gonna kind of be like what went on in reality. So yeah, so he's gonna take on, aside from Raven, pretty much everyone that was in the Flock at the time. So we have Perry Saturn, Billy Kidman, Scotty Riggs, Lodi, Van Hammer, Reese, Sick Boy. Probably a couple others, but those are the few key members of the Flock that I could think of. So, Goldberg successfully going through as many of the Flock members, just spear, jackhammer, just basically demolishing everyone from the Sick Boys and the Van Hammers, the Lodis, um, Billy Kidman as well. And then eventually it's going to come down to Goldberg and Perry Saturn, and they're going to go at it for good chunk of time. Yeah, so I thought Goldberg and Saturn actually had a pretty solid performance, in the actual Spring Stampede as well. So you give them a couple give them a good chunk amount of time for them to really showcase what they can do, and maybe make it seem like try to put over not only Goldberg but also put over Perry Saturn, as the second in command of the Flock. Um, so yeah, so they're going at it. Eventually, Goldberg will fight back. Saturn at first seems to have all the offense. I mean, this is basically going to be like Raven's rules, because they're because ever since Raven came into WCW, he always had this uh, stipulation in his contract that you know, especially whether it involved him, Raven himself or any of the Flock members, that every match would be contested under Raven's rules, meaning that it's no DQs, no countouts, anything goes. So this is probably this gauntlet match will probably be under Raven's rules, and maybe not probably, but just definitely part of Raven's rules. And you know, Goldberg, eventually tries to fight Saturn, and goes for the spear, and just as Goldberg tries to set up for the jackhammer, um, Lodi is gonna come in and throw in the towel in the middle of the ring, indicating that they surrender, and basically Goldberg wins the match via forfeit, and the crowd boos because they know that that they're dissatisfied by the way the match ended. Goldberg, normally would come out there, spear and a jackhammer to get the 3 count, but this time it's a little different, and it kind of catches Goldberg off guard, and he's a little unsatisfied despite the fact he won the match. They know that they can't beat Goldberg, so Lodi just throws in that towel and just indicate that they give up, and perhaps they'll fight another day. And Perry Saturn's pretty frustrated, and knowing that he can beat Goldberg. Um, so who knows where it goes from here? But yeah, so Goldberg will win the match, but just in a pretty different fashion than you would think. Um, so there you have it. That. Then we have is a tag team match between the NWO and WCW members. So Hollywood Hulk Hogan and Kurt Hennig would team up to take on Lex Luger and Larry Zbyszko. So the purpose of this match is to basically really showcase WCW, the NWO team, and try and get them on the card. Kurt Hennig's taken over Savage's role. Especially now that Savage is kicked out of the NWO, so Kurt Hennig ends up taking over, and him and Hogan have been kind of becoming more buddy buddies as the months go by, and they're tag teaming on TV, so they're kind of developing a mutual partnership between the two. Lex Luger and Zbyszko, they've been kind of also been a duo, going back to the later half of '97. Um, and you get to go into 1998. Larry Zbyszko was the guest referee in that Bret Hart Lex Luger submission match, and Luger came up short, granted, and just a little bit disappointed that he came up short, and seeing Larry Zbyszko holding Bret Hart's arm kind of really leaves like a bit of a distaste in his mouth of, and despite all that, they try to kind of work aside their differences, and Hogan, Lex Luger also have their history, so you can maybe bring up the fact that Lex Luger had won the WCW World Title, that he brought the belt back from the NWO, doing something that no one else could have done up until that point. And back in August when he won it, but it was only just a matter of time before Hulk Hogan got the last laugh and won the belt back. Won the world title, and regaining the belt back in the NWO's hands. So Luger, is kind of he kind of feels like he doesn't get any credit, and Sting, even though he's Lex Luger is Sting's best friend, they made amends ever since Sting won the world title belt at Starrcade, and Lex Luger came out to apologize and even congratulate him. But there's also this other side of him that he just wishes that that he feels that he should be considered the undisputed savior of WCW, or the franchise, so to speak. But at the same time, Luger tries his best not to let his personal differences get the better of him. And we have the tag team match taking place, and despite their efforts, Hogan and Kurt Hennig will end up winning the match, and Hulk Hogan's gonna leg drop Larry Zbyszko to get that 3 count. So yeah, so basically, really showing that the NWO aren't completely losing their touch, as far as their momentum's been concerned. Um, yeah, so Hogan and Kurt Hennig will successfully get their victory. Then we have is a cruiserweight title versus mass match between Chris Jericho, the champion, defending the belt against Juventud Guerrera. So if Juventud loses the mask, then yeah, if Guerrera loses the match, then he will have to be forced to remove his mask. Um, and Jericho also has to put something up for grabs, which is the cruiserweight title. So it basically plays out the same way as their Super Brawl 8 match, but instead it's at Spring Stampede. So I'm not going to reiterate too much about in terms of the build up, but basically the same as what we saw with Jericho coming out on top and Juventud reluctantly removes his mask. And then we get to the last three matches on here, and first up we have is the U.S. title defense between Raven and Hacksaw Jim Duggan. So, like I discussed earlier in the video, Raven had won the U.S. title belt from DDP in a hard-fought cage match. So the Flock is obviously banned from ringside, and it's already the announcers informed the viewers that DDP has sustained multiple injuries and that he'll be out of action for a number of months. Um, and Raven just really being like this sadistic villain, that guy that just you can't really stand. So Raven's coming out, cutting these promos, and just proclaiming himself to be the so-called people's champion now, especially um, now that Raven's got some gold in his hands or around his waist or on his on his arm, whatever the case may be. Eventually, Hacksaw Duggan will come out and basically talk about Raven and how, and basically his reaction to what he did to his best friend Diamond Dallas Page. What he did was very selfish and unsympathetic, and it's just the fact that Raven claims himself to be the people's champion kind of really discusses Hacksaw Duggan. He even talks about the hard-working labor, talking about the U.S. being the land of the free, a land of opportunity. But what has Raven done to work his way up? Basically, and to kind of really prove that they have the match at Spring Stampede, and they're going at it. I mean, I know Hacksaw Jim Duggan was kind of more of a jobber by this point. But he still had a cult following during this time, and I think they could really. It's kind of more of a filler feud, but just try to really put Raven over, and I would actually have him go on, basically go over Hacksaw Duggan for the U.S. title belt here. Then we have is Bret Hart and Kevin Nash, so this is gonna be kind of a number one contenders match, and basically Kevin Nash is still bitter over the fact that he came out short against Sting at Uncensored. Bret Hart, tries to, he's very interested in going after Sting and the World Heavyweight title belt, but Kevin Nash, just comes in and just basically trashes Bret Hart in his promos. And it's kind of one of those things, because Kevin Nash and Bret Hart, they've went at it once before. I think they could really put on a pretty good match. Um, and Kevin Nash still has this, still proclaiming himself to be the giant killer. He's been, you know, he's just so obsessed with, the fact that he hates vanilla midgets. We bring up the fact that Kevin Nash doesn't, tolerate having to wrestle someone very smaller as him. And even also add the fact that Kevin Nash, blames Bret for the reason why the NWO don't have the world title belt in their grasp anymore. He can't forget, how Bret screwed Hogan, once before, and um, that kind of, it kind of eats up inside Kevin Nash. So you kind of build it up like that, and you also have the Giant coming out there and basically I think there could be kind of like a ref bump along the way. So the ref won't even notice that the Giant came out and interfered in the match. So the announcers put it over that we haven't seen Kevin Nash, or excuse me, we haven't seen the Giant in a while ever since um, he got his neck broken at Super Brawl. Um, so the Giant choke slams Kevin Nash. Bret Hart goes for the cover. He's crouching over to Kevin Nash and goes for the pinfall. Referee makes a slow 3 count, and Bret Hart wins the match there. So Kevin Nash isn't pleased, and he's kind of shocked that the Giant even came out there and even did such a thing where he just, like, we all thought that the Giant um hasn't been around for a while. That, like, what's he doing here? Like, we didn't expect him. I think we thought it was like a career-ending neck injury. Um, but yeah, so Bret Hart goes over Kevin Nash in that match. And then we get to the World Heavyweight Championship match between Sting and the Macho Man. Yeah, this is a match that they did in actuality, and it was actually a pretty good match for what it was. Only thing I would change is the finish, and Sting is not going to lose the World Heavyweight title belt in my revisionist booking here. So but I think this could be a pretty solid match, and Sting will go over Randy Savage. Miss Elizabeth will probably play a role and try to help Savage and resort to some dirty tactics. So even though Randy Savage is no longer the NWO, that doesn't mean that he's a full-fledged babyface officially. So he's kind of showing more of shades of gray. He's basically kind of like the lone wolf. Um, where does he go from here? And and he's just also basically showing that that he could win the world title belt without having to help, or without any help from his old crew. So Sting is going to win the World Heavyweight Championship belt, or retain the world title belt from the Macho Man. And Miss Elizabeth at some point will probably get escorted out of the arena thanks to the referee. So so that kind of gives Sting a bit of a leeway there, and to win and to retain the world title in the process. And then, after that, Bret Hart comes out, he enters the ring, stares at Sting. Sting holds that World Heavyweight Championship belt, and Bret Hart just, stands, just basically gazes at Sting, across from one another. And that's basically how you end the show. So that's pretty much it for my Spring Stampede pay-per-view event fantasy booking. I actually booked this like the first time around, and unfortunately my sound recorder, um, something kind of froze up, and I had to do this audio file clip over again, so I had to like redo it. So that kind of really disappointed me because I thought that the first audio clip attempt that I did for Spring Stampede was one of my best attempts. So it kind of stressed me out the first time around that I had to, go out my way and redo it once again. So I hope you take a liking and understand where I'm coming from in terms of this, in terms of this fourth entry, so to speak. So stay tuned as I book the May pay-per-view Slamboree, and just leave down your feedback down in the comment section below. And until next time, this is Gold Standard 924 signing out.